Okay, so I'd like to welcome everyone to the Supporting Children's Language Development Through Media webinar. We have two guests with us tonight, Dr. Henward and Yeojoo Yoon, who is one of her graduate students. And I'm gonna go ahead and let them introduce themselves and let them get started. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to write them down in the chat and I will be moderating. My name is Jen Scudder. I am the graduate assistant at wpsu. So I'll be moderating and recording, and I'll be putting this recording up after, after tonight's session. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Henward introduce herself.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. Allison Henward, and we're so pleased that you can join us today. I am an associate professor of early childhood education at Penn State, and so I do work on media, on curriculum, and on curriculum in different contexts. And so I've been studying children and media really for about the last 15 years and in different projects, including one with Yeojoo Yoon.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Yeojoo Yoon. I'm a doctoral candidate in the early childhood education program at Penn State. And I've been researching young children's literacy practices in and out of school context. And one of my current research is about young immigrant children's media and digital culture that can be kind of currency for them across domains like school, home, and community. So in my research, I've investigated like what's the role of media in children's learning, literacy, and belonging. So I'm so thrilled to talk about this topic tonight.
Wonderful. And so we were talking a little bit about who we are and how we come to this, and we're both former early childhood teachers that were really interested in the role of media and literacy and learning. So we also wanted to, I know we have a wonderful, wonderful group here today, but we were wondering in the chat if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what you bring to this and kind of your background, and also I think kind of how you're thinking about media. So those are two different things. Why don't we start with who you are, and then we will talk a little bit about media, what we mean by it, and the questions that we have about it. Wonderful. Oh my goodness, I love having all the early childhood people here. Wonderful. Fantastic. Now, to keep me on track, you like to have a lot of visuals, so you'll still be able to see us, but I'm going to go ahead and share our screen so we can talk about how we're thinking about this. And what we'd really like is to have a dialogue with teachers and with families as to what are concerns, how are we thinking about this, and hopefully we can share how we've seen through research and your experiences as educators, how media can be used, especially now. And we came to this topic as early childhood researchers and teacher educators in a time where everybody's been spending a lot of time at home and a lot of time with media. And so concerns that have been there for quite a while have been heightened. So if I can share my screen with everybody. Let me see. There we go. And do this. Thank you. And hopefully you can see the Niagara Falls. Can you all give me a thumbs up if we can see Niagara Falls? Perfect, perfect, perfect. Yes, that is, yes, a couple of years ago in a lovely fall picture. So one of the things that we are really interested in is what are our questions and concerns about media? Because when we talk about media, these are things that always come up as to young children, as to media. So we'd like to spend about 3 minutes in the chat. What are some concerns and some central concerns and that you have around media? And we're going to leave it really open because as to maybe what media is, how to use it, or any other questions you have. And we really like to keep this in a way that's helpful and useful to everybody. So let's take about 3 minutes if you can. Yeah. Mention. And as you all type these, we'll just be writing them down so that we can make sure that we address them too. The question about power play. So I see about appropriate material, advertising. Oh. Right. There's some great questions. These are amazing, amazing topics. I love this. So I've been writing them down so that we make sure that we address things, but we also want to have some time for any questions that you may have. So what I think it's helpful to do first is to talk about what we mean by media and why and how we're thinking about it. And then I love some of the questions that you have. They really will go to more of our agenda and what we're thinking about. So what is media and why it matters for children's learning? We also want to talk about the idea about connecting what children see and engage with in media and schools. And to do so, we'll be talking about our own research and research we've read and studied about how children use media. And we're going to be specifically looking at literacy learning with the idea that this is that children are engaging with other forms of learning as well. And then also coming to strategies for maximizing media and literacy development, including addressing critical media literacy and what are concerns about power, play, representation in media, even with very, very young children. So hopefully there's something that we don't address, we will have time.
Yeah, so I think it is a good place to start off thinking about media, or like and with your concerns and questions. Because during the time I researched media, one thing I realized that is the definition of media and the range the term covers are like too large to narrow down as a single definition to describe it. But I also think it is helpful to have some time to think about like how we define and understand media, to revisit our practical and pedagogical approach to children's play and learning through media. Part of why we wanted to do this is to think about how we define media and the relationship between media and children, because I think knowing how we define something can change so much. So, and maybe it also provides us to think about what we want to do with media and what we don't want to do with media. Yeah.
And so it is hard when we define what media is. And so thinking about it can be the platforms that children use, but these are always changing, and media characters are always changing. And so when we talk about media, a good, I always say like a good working definition might be cartoons, what they see on TV, what they engage with online. And of course, this changes, and it will change in the next month. But it can be video games, and also the idea as of media being, probably that center thing, which very few young people would recognize to be of a cassette tape, but we also think about books as media.
Mm-hmm.
Over. And so one of the largest questions that comes up, I think, is about thinking about how we think about media and what are the concerns about media. Do you want to? So one of the things our question and our concern here, as Yeojoo mentioned, is not about whether media is good or bad. And it's a different type of question of how is it used, how can it be used, and what are the conversations that need to happen around it. So we do know that, of course, and especially within pandemic, and that there's an increasing amount of screen time. And so one of the questions that I've always been asked, and I know Yeojoo's been asked, how much time is good? And we don't really have that's not exactly what we study. So, I think it's important to look at like the American Academy of Pediatrics. And also I've written in the past about having a good balance of what children are doing, that it's just one way that they learn, and that there are benefits, but keep a balance with things.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I also think another like the concerns on children's using media is kind of screen addiction kind of thing. And in this case, it often like follows the diet metaphor kind of children's media consumption is distinguished as like good or healthy choice or bad or unhealthy choice. And it also embedded in the image of children. So like children lack of capacity to distinguish, and because they have no self-control like that. So we have to think about that.
And one of the interesting things about kids and media is that if you look back in the 20s and 30s, people didn't like comic books. So there's always been a concern about kids and media of some type. But our question more is about what we do with it, which I love all the questions you all have in the chat as to what do we do with it. So the way that we think about it comes from literacy researchers. And one of the, I guess, most notable one is Ann Dyson. And her work is was just influential, monumental, where she called children's media use. So the cartoon characters, the ideas that she found that they see on screen to be textual tools. And she said, these are really important for children because it's what they see, it's their membership in their families, it's what families watch, and the neighborhoods, what they're doing with other kids and within the communities in the neighborhoods. And also that this is something that's really super important in terms of pleasure, power, and companionship. And so we are asking you really quickly to reflect for a second about your own media usage, maybe when you were a child or something related to that, about membership and neighborhoods, communities, and forms of pleasure, power, and companionship. How are these used? And as you're thinking about this, we are doing a lot of storytelling today. And one of the ones that I've always used is my teenage daughter, when she was in first grade, was writing, and she was writing, and they had, the writing standards, and she was kind of lukewarm about it, but she was very, very into a small plastic toy 10 years ago called Shopkins. And when she was able to write about this, her stories became more complex. They became, she knew what every character did. And there were books written about Shopkins in first grade. And the idea of that this just becomes one subject that they write about. Because as her teacher and I talked about, our goal was to get her writing and main idea and detail and all of these writing things. What she was writing about was up to her. And it made it more enjoyable for her. So will you share yours in the chat, please? We're going with wait time today. Come join us with them. Nice, thanks, Jennifer.
Or whatever, which
Right, about my virtual pets on the game, absolutely. Right, and we're having people that are talking about books and using characters out of books, and those are ones that we often think of in schools, and we're happy with that idea. If I'm thinking about Beverly Cleary or some of our early childhood heroes, and to see if we wrote something in about Ramona, that would be something that would be accepted. And so what are other things? What are these things that are meaningful? Music, comic books. Absolutely. Pokemon, very much so. So what do we do with these, and how do we think about this? Yeojoo, you want to take it?
Yep. So we also have I kind of think, because when Allison and I discussed what we want to talk about this topic, we had like similar episode that popped into our mind, which is about Starbucks. Because
She'll probably tell you about our coffee problem, but
yeah. Yeah. So we have a child who I have a child who has who has named the Starbucks logo as an Americano, like mommy's coffee, since he was 2 or so. So I think the Starbucks emblem played a role as a symbol of mommy's coffee or Americano or latte. And he later used the symbolic tools such as like Starbucks cups or my sipping behaviors and ordering like that in his play. And I think he understood the social and cultural meaning of the symbol through his social relations and appropriated within the context. So like from a developmental standpoint, for young children, engaging in a symbol system is kind of a path of engaging in social and cultural ways of interacting. And it is further like developed with foundational literacy skills like word learning, representational skills, or narrative skills. That.
absolutely. When we think of like with little people, if they're wearing, they can come in wearing superheroes or there's an identification with that. And I see so many preschool teachers and kinder and first grade teachers. And I remember of teaching when if I would talk about letters and kids would be like, oh, well, that's Brian's letter, because it became an identification. And so these things have meaning to children, and that's how they develop symbolic meaning. So these are really important. The other things that are really important, we mentioned about the textual, these textual tools and these textual toys, that they're things that kids use as they create stories. So there's a paper that a colleague and I published about, oh goodness, now it would be about 5 or 6 years ago, about a young girl who was 4 years old and started telling me a story and crafted a story using Hannah Montana, boots from Dora, and a monster movie. And this child I found was so creative in the way that she kind of wove these different genres and created the story that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when we're talking about literacy, the ability not just with oral storytelling, but to create these things and borrow these things showed an amazing sophistication. And it also to us shows one of the concerns is that children will reproduce everything they see on TV. And and we like to think about it as remixing. They borrow it from here, they use a little bit from here, and just the same way that they borrow things that they watch and games that they play and they make new ones. This is the same thing that we see with children and media and literacy. And then of course, imaginative play. Dramatic play, very, very popular for where media characters will come in. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what did this look like in real life? And so we are big believers in showing children in their everyday lives and how either teachers facilitated their literacy or ways in which we saw maybe spaces where literacy could be facilitated, but maybe was missed, to talk about the ways that this can happen in schools.
Yeah. So I brought some stories of immigrant children and their language and literacy and play and belonging that happen in the classroom and at home. These stories are from my dissertation research, and I studied children from a specific immigrant population in Korea and their literacy practices. Speaking of some context of Korea, Korea has a kind of strong national identity, so that they want to keep it through like many cultural and social practices. And one of them is implementing assimilatory language and literacy education for all children, including immigrant children. And in the classroom, I served many official literacy activities that made the immigrant children who speak Russian, which is their home language, they're not included and isolated. And in these times, they also were not capable and visible in many ways. But when I looked at what the children really do with like media or popular culture in free play time or other unofficial times, I found a very like different story. And these are photos about the first story, like first child I want to talk today. There was a child who did not speak at all in the classroom. He immigrated. He was a 4-year-old immigrant, an emergent bilingual child living in Korea, and he immigrated from Russia when he was 2. So he speaks fluently in Russian, and he understands Korean in a limited way. And according to the teacher, he speaks just a few words in Korean in the classroom, like yes, no, and I have to pee, just like that. So the teachers recognized him as he lacks literacy and language skills in Korean. So, however, there was no support in the preschool for children like him who are still learning the Korean language. Although the preschool, like geographically, the preschool is located in the center of the community of the particular immigrant group, they did not have any administrative and practical support for the children. So the child and the family are socially, culturally, and linguistically marginalized. But Andre is his name, which is pseudonym. Andre is very savvy with children's media culture. He really likes to watch multiple kids animations and plays online games. And he really likes to watch YouTube videos that were featured in 2 languages, in Korean and Russian. So whenever he wanted to watch videos, he used his voice because he didn't, excuse me, he didn't write or read Korean or Russian. So he used his voices because he knew the pronunciations of the words, like the game titles like Among Us or Brawl Stars, like that. So he spoke to the voice search feature on his mother's or his own cell phone to access the videos. So I think it is safe to say that using his voice and technology created opportunities for him to access the social and cultural world. And he also brought the media culture into the classroom, where like he was often not included in the official classroom activities. Although he did not speak and other children recognized that he's silent almost at all times in the classroom, he used multimodal communication resources, like he drew Among Us pictures, played with other children through bodily plays. He made sounds from animation like zombie sounds, and he used materials like Pokemon watch, like Pokemon bracelet, and Among Us stickers like the photo on the left side, to play with other children. And he also wrote some words from the game and animation and started to communicate in Korean more than before. So while his like multimodal resources had more kind of currency in peer culture than in the official school culture, through these resources, he actively engaged in play, social interaction, and learning. So he was suddenly included through the source materials from media in schooling and in the peer culture. Yeah, so while he was silent for around 2 years in the preschool, like previously, but over the periods I observed, he spoke, read, and wrote Korean and Russian like more and more. And it obviously developed his language and literacy learning and provided him a sense of belonging. And I brought 2 more episodes. And the second one is about 2 young immigrant girls who are from the same immigrant population in Korea as Andre in the previous slide. These two girls are immigrant children and who are also like emergent bilinguals. They speak Russian and Korean. And the two girls are really familiar with children's pop culture like Frozen. And actually they knew and enjoyed a variety of genres like online games, songs, animations, and movies and games. I said that. And they usually bring that popular cultural knowledge into the classroom in different ways and recontextualized ways. So, but the classroom is kind of a print-centered and technology-restricted classroom as typical early childhood classrooms in Korea and in the US, I think. But they like to draw popular culture and digital technology in multiple modes, like they made a cell phone in the, as you can see in the photo, they made cell phones curated with symbols that are meaningful for them. So when you see in the photo at the right-hand side at the bottom, they put two different languages. They put Korean, Russian, and also numbers. And icons of applications that they like to use, like YouTube, the red square one, and Roblox, with the people one, and instrument like piano, and one of the most popular messenger app in Korea, like Kakao Talk, like that. So the paper cell phones were used in the children's print and play, and the materials in the play have more like affordances than the real cell phones that they use. Yeah.
And I should segment that. Can you add in, which is I love having all the early childhood people here. Can you add in anything you've seen that's like this? Just maybe into the chat. So something you've seen, something you've watched, something you have, children have talked about. Does this look familiar? Sorry. Oh, I love the Chromebooks example and the cell phones out of bark. I'm hearing, yes, connection with children that have all of their, they have repertoires in other languages, which I think is super, super important to recognize that, the strengths that they have in other languages and how we honor that too. Yes. And we did some research about 8 years ago about a young immigrant or emergent bilingual and immigrant child who was a monolingual Spanish speaker and really wouldn't talk to anybody in the classroom, but many of the children also spoke Spanish. So it was not a linguistic, just wasn't very comfortable with other children, who was shy and would often play alone. But the teacher spoke about one time when he came dressed as Spider-Man, that it piqued the other kids' interest and they really re-engaged with him. And what in turn that did is they would talk to him a lot. And so that enhanced his language. And it gave them something common to talk about. Think about this. We do this as adults. It gives us a common thing to talk about. Given time as you're sharing, yeah, usually you want to keep sharing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Another example is actually happened at her home, but I brought this because she used YouTube Play and language and literacy, which is as many, I think many other children did. This is taken from another ongoing research about children's YouTube Play. And this photo is a child playing with YouTube videos, and particularly related to toy unboxing videos. She watches those videos a lot, but at the same time, she created her own unboxing videos. She's a 7-year-old Korean American girl who is an emergent bilingual child speaking English and Korean. And her first language is English, and she also can speak Korean in a limited way. And at home, she often used the YouTube application to watch a variety of videos, including game reviews, toy unboxing, and toy playing videos. And for the study, I investigated like what happened when she created her videos to understand like children's capability to contextualize media as opposed to the notion of passive viewers who repeat or dictate the content. And in the unboxing video she made, she reviewed toys like My Little Pony, Barbie, and LOL Surprise like that. So when she performed as a creator, like producer, she engaged in dialogue relationship with audiences, and the videos, I mean the technology and the toys she brought to the screen. And she adjusted her use of languages through contextualized understanding. So when she was with her friend who spoke Korean more than English, she used both languages to her friend and to the screen. So she used particular languages that YouTube creators use, like when they introduce toys with a dialogue like, hello everyone, today I'm gonna review this, like that. She used that, but it was always used as a way of reflecting the context she was in. And so I thought she was able to address her potential audiences and people around her while she created the video. So she did not dictate the unboxing videos she watched it or only consume the material culture being presented. She developed not only skills in 2 languages, but also knowledge of how to address people that communicate with her in her real life and in virtual spaces.
I love the, we always say as early childhood teachers, we didn't always have the time to do this, but to be able to do this and look deeply at what's happening and what they're doing. Sorry, everybody. What they're doing gives us an idea of the complexity and the sophistication of young children. So one of the main questions that comes up for us is, so knowing that children are active users and active makers with media, what can families and educators do? So we talk about this, about talking about media, talking about and using media. And the first one is the idea of playing media games and participating. And if you're a teacher or a parent or a family member of, sometimes you'll hear all of the information about a certain subject. But for me and for a lot of media researchers, this is something that they know a lot about and they know details of. So when we play the media games and we participate, it also positions children, typically this is something they know a lot about and they're really interested in, and so it gives them opportunities to kind of take the role of a more informed person. And with that, also the idea about recognizing their interests. When we recognize interests, we can also talk and ask them to expand this. So asking children to talk about and describe things, we have amazing language going on there. And this also goes into the idea about belongings. If we are educators and we know what children are interested in, this is a great way in order to keep belongings with keep belonging and have children integrated into classrooms that may not always feel comfortable about it. And I'm seeing this in the chat of if I have children, let's see, children if they have ASD, or it might be other ways, and it gives them, when you have something in common with somebody. But one of the best things we can do is talking and asking questions, because then we know what they know. We can learn about this, and we learn about what the subjects are and how we connect this. And oftentimes we don't think about media as prior knowledge, but it is prior knowledge, and it's children's prior knowledge. And so the question about how do we use this and what does it look like in the classroom is, and looking at it as just another thing that kids know and textual tools about it. But I think as we come to next, one of the major concerns that comes up a lot is, well, I'm not always sure about what kids are watching. So if you in the chat, let us know about if that's a concern, or I saw it initially, you can give us a thumbs up, or what are they watching, or what is it? Is it good for them? The idea that is something good for them. And no, not all media, just like watching media all day is not a good idea. I don't recommend it, with my students or with my children. But also, we have a major concern, and we've had one for a long time, about sometimes what appears on television and media. And so this leads us to thinking about something that's called critical media literacy. And so if in the chart, if in the chat, if you can give us a 1 to 5 about how comfortable you are with this idea of critical media literacy. If you are like, this is the first I've ever heard of it, please give us a 1. If you just read a book about it, maybe you're at a 5, or you're at a 4, something like that. But where are you in a 1 to 5 about the idea about critical media, please? Perfect. So when we're thinking about, this is wonderful. Thank you so much. And if please, if there are things to add, we definitely encourage it. A critical media talk is having and teaching children how to analyze and think about the media that they see. And this is an important skill that we see for everybody, but it's very important because with whether it's cartoons, whether it's media, not everything is great and not everything is what we want them to see. And for critical media scholars, it's rather than blocking children from seeing things because that is life, it's the idea of equipping them with tools so that they can say, what is that? Is that the way it should be? And being able to, the same way that they would read a book or think about something with an idea of questioning it, the same thing happens with critical media talk. And this can happen starting with very, very young children. And oftentimes people shy away from the idea. When I say critical, it's really looking at power and representation. Who's always there, who's never there, who's there and in what way. And I meant to put a clip of it on here, but one of the famous one is the way that Indigenous people are represented on the Disney Peter Pan, and the ways that occurs in stereotypical and horribly racist ways. And this is something that young children see, and they often see at very, very young ages. So guiding children in critical media talk could look like, I wonder, I'm really only seeing that there are only white characters up there. I wonder why there aren't any people of color. And posing something like that, if I'm looking at racial representation, can be really helpful. And there's ways, I wonder that, you know, and I can do it. Oh, that's just silly. Why? Oh, wait, they have all of the, look, all of the female bunnies are doing the chores with the bows on there. Why do you think they only have the girl bunnies doing that? That doesn't look like what we see. Well, that's not very fair. So 3 and 4-year-olds have a really strong sense of fairness and justice. And I always say, if you doubt that, you know, try to split a cookie. And 3-year-olds know it. And so talking about, I wonder why there, you know, there's only people, I only see people that are walking around. I don't see anybody in a wheelchair. I wonder why that is. And as they get older, this builds into these ideas of, you know, who's centered. When we think about, well, why are they only telling the story from this person's perspective? But these small things, getting them to stop and look at messages and look at ideas. And this plays really nicely into what people would see of anti-biased work. It's very much the same of talking about narratives and what's happening, and teaching children to look at them and look at it with a very, very, you know, discerning eye. And we've shown in previous research, this has very little to do with developmental. They should be developmentally appropriate, but children don't just get it as they get older. They get it because it's a skill that's taught. And so we are really happy to provide some resources on this. Vivian Vasquez is a great researcher that does wonderful stuff with preschool kids on this. And then, you know, get more and more as the kids get older. But the ways that we ask them and we talk to them is really important. You know, remembering that we're talking to a 3 and a 4-year-old. But it's really important to pose those questions and to give them a moment to reconsider always what they've seen, and to get them to think about, is that fair? Is that just? Now, that's kind of how we think about critical media talk. So we just have a couple of questions or a couple of moments left. And so we'd like everybody to think about for the next, your takeaways. How might you use this tomorrow in a new idea, whether it's in your classrooms, whether it's in a lesson, maybe it's stopping and paying attention. So we'd like you to think about this and come up with 1 or 2, I guess, strategies or takeaways that you would that you could employ tomorrow. Yes, the notes of saying, you know, social media, the media is it's prevalent in many, many people's lives. And it doesn't mean that everything's, you know, we may have concerns. So part of the work, and I know that it's happening on secondary levels here and at middle schools and elementary, is about, you know, academic literacy and critical media literacy and the ways in which we read the world. And this is even more important, as we're saying, with social media and different ideas. And I love these strategies I'm reading, and I'm just so inspired. But the idea of if we ask kids to think about, well, how else could it be? This to me is very similar to writing prompts that we might see in elementary and middle school and high school. Of, how might you change an ending, or what's the theme, or what's the possibility? And there's also really great ways of teaching, social emotional skills. Oh, that person looks really sad. Why? Oh gosh, when people say things that, how the other people are treating. So there's ways in which we can definitely use media as teaching tools as well. Yes, and encouraging families to talk about what they're doing and the meanings that they're making from things. I am absolutely amazed, and especially as my own children get older and older, the meanings and how the different ways that they think about things. Yes, and listening, LL Dolls, PJ Masks. This is how I know about most of my popular culture. And I think, Yeojoo, you're in the same boat. We have to listen. Yeah. Well, we want to thank everybody for joining us and for this amazing conversation. Thank you for being so just in it with us, even virtually, and for thinking about different ways of considering media at home, at school, and what this can do for us of really bridging these and using this knowledge that children have.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
I would also like to thank both of you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate the talk. This was a fantastic subject, and I think we got some really fantastic ideas about media. Before the participants go tonight, if you wouldn't mind filling out this form that I'm going to put into the chat. This is how you can receive the Act 48 credit if you wanted to get Act 48 as part of tonight's webinar. And also, this is how we'll be able to send out those PBS books that we have as the special resource for today. So some of you may have already given us your address, but in that form, it asks for your address again. We would really appreciate if you're interested in receiving the books that you put the address in there so that we have all the addresses in one spot for when we mail these out. And with that, I really appreciate everyone coming tonight. And we will put this recording up onto our website, hopefully tomorrow or the next day. So if there's anybody you would like to share this with who was not able to come tonight, please feel free to direct that to them. We'll send out that web address once we have it created. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.